I donated my dad's coat a month after he died. A week later, it came back to my doorstep in a beat-up cardboard box with a crooked post-it stuck to the collar that said, "Check the pocket." For a full minute, I just held that box like it might explode. Before I begin, tell me in the comments where in the world you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. And if stories like this stay with you, please like and subscribe. It really helps me continue sharing the truths I've carried for years. Okay, now let me tell you how that box ended up in my hands, and why 3 little words on a sticky note almost broke me more than the funeral did. My name is Emily Parker. I was 32 when all of this happened, living in a cramped 1-bedroom just outside Denver, Colorado. I worked from home doing medical billing, which meant long days hunched over a laptop, arguing with insurance representatives I would never meet. My life, before the coat came back, was painfully ordinary. Coffee, emails, phone calls, microwave dinners, dishes in the sink, Netflix humming in the background until I fell asleep on the couch. The only thing that really didn't fit in that tiny apartment was my dad. He didn't live there, obviously. He had lived, in Ohio, 8 hours and a long drive away. But after he died of a sudden heart attack, pieces of him followed me home. A toolbox by my front door, his old fishing hat on the back of a chair, and most of all, the coat. Dark brown wool, corduroy collar, worn around the cuffs. If you grew up somewhere cold, you probably picture a parent with one specific jacket. For me, that coat was my dad. It smelled like cigarettes and motor oil and cheap aftershave. When I was little, I'd wrinkle my nose and complain. By the time I was grown, that smell just meant his hair. He wore it at school pickups, on the sidelines of frozen soccer games, shoveling neighbors' driveways after working all day at the shop. He had other jackets, but somehow that one always ended up on the hook by his door. When I flew back to Ohio for the funeral and stood in his small rental house, sorting through a lifetime of clutter, I kept telling my aunt, "No, I don't need that," until she held up the coat. I took it without thinking. Back in Denver, I hung it on the hook by my own front door. Suddenly, every time I left my apartment, his coat was the first thing I saw. For a couple of weeks, that felt comforting. On the worst nights, when the silence got too loud, I'd slip it on. It swallowed me, sleeves past my hands, hem almost to my knees, but the weight of it grounded me. Sometimes I talked to him while I wore it. Quiet little one-sided conversations you'd never admit to if you weren't grieving. Why didn't you listen to the doctor? Why didn't you tell me you were this tired? Why does the apartment feel wrong without you when you never even lived here? Grief makes you do strange, soft, unreasonable things. Talking to a coat was one of mine. Then one morning, about a month after he died, I walked into the hallway and saw it hanging there, and something in me recoiled. Instead of comfort, it felt like a weight holding me in place. A reminder of every phone call I'd meant to make, of every "we'll talk about it next time" that never got a next time. The sight of it made my chest tight. I realized my apartment was slowly turning into a museum of my dad, and I couldn't live in a museum. So I made a decision. I'd keep a few things that really mattered. His watch, his toolbox, a couple of photos. But the clothes, the everyday fabric, had to go. I pulled the coat off the hook. The wool scratched my fingers. For a second, I almost put it back. Then I grabbed a big black trash bag and shoved it inside. I remember whispering, "I'm sorry," like he could hear me. By the time I was done, I had 2 bags filled with his clothes. I loaded them into the backseat of my car and drove to a small thrift store a few miles away, the kind with a handwritten open sign and a parking lot full of potholes. Inside, a bored teenager took the bags from me and slid a donation slip across the counter. I didn't write my name. I didn't want a receipt. I just wanted the weight out of my apartment. On the drive home, I felt lighter. Not better, exactly, but like I'd cracked a window in a stuffy room. For the first time since the funeral, the hook by my front door was empty. That emptiness hit harder than I expected. It stared at me every time I walked in or out, a blank rectangle of wall where his presence used to live. I kept telling myself I'd done the right thing. Some stranger who needed a coat would buy it. Maybe it would keep someone's dad from freezing at a bus stop this winter. Days passed. Work calls, emails, microwave meals. Friends texted to ask if I was hanging in there, and I mostly replied with yeah, just tired, because explaining grief in detail felt impossible. Nothing strange happened. No spooky signs, no flickering lights, no dreams that felt like messages. Just the steady hum of normal life and the quiet ache under my ribs. And then came that Wednesday afternoon. I was on the phone with an insurance rep who swore they'd never received a form I'd faxed and emailed. My headset was digging into my ear. The doorbell rang. The sharp buzz made me jump so hard my pen rolled onto the floor. I muttered something about checking a file, muted the call, and walked to the door in my socks. When I opened it, there was a medium-sized cardboard box on the mat. No logo, no colorful tape. Just plain brown, dented at one corner, sealed with beige tape. My name and apartment number were written on the top in thick black marker. Emily Parker, 3B. I hadn't ordered anything. I hadn't given my address to anyone new. I didn't recognize the handwriting. I picked the box up. It was heavy, solid, like fabric folded tight. The tape peeled up easily under my thumb. I opened the flaps. Brown wool, corduroy color. My breath snagged in my throat. My dad's coat stayed back at me from the box. Same frayed stitching on the cuff. Same little oil stain on the shoulder. Same tiny burn mark near the pocket. I just froze. Every rational thought lunged forward at once. Maybe the thrift store had some policy and mailed it back. Maybe someone found something in the pocket with my name on it. Maybe a well-meaning stranger had gone out of their way to track me down. Except I hadn't written my name on anything. I hadn't told anyone which thrift store I'd chosen. The postmark was from a town I didn't know. That's when I saw the post-it. It was stuck crookedly to the front of the coat, bright yellow, one corner folded. In thick, all capital letters, someone had written, "Check the pocket." No hello, no signature, nothing else. My heart hammered so hard it made my hands shake. I stepped into the hallway and glanced both ways, as if whoever left it might still be there. The hallway was empty. Just the old building smell, the hum of the fluorescent light, and a distant TV behind a closed door. I peeled the note off slowly. The handwriting wasn't my dad's, but touching the coat again felt like rewinding a goodbye I'd barely managed to say once. Letting it back into my apartment felt like inviting my grief to unpack and stay. And under every logical explanation I tried to build, thrift store policy, freak coincidence, some bizarre kindness, was a quieter thought I couldn't shake. What if he left something in there for you, and you threw it away? The idea made my skin prickle. I lifted the coat out of the box. The faded smell hit me: smoke, oil, old aftershave, and cold wool. My eyes burned. The post-it crackled between my fingers. I read the 3 words again. Check the pocket. Check the pocket. Check the pocket. Standing in my doorway, holding my dead father's coat and a nameless warning, I felt something I never expected. Not just grief, but the first sharp edge of fear. Because whatever was sitting in those pockets wasn't going to be just loose change or a crumpled receipt. And I knew that once I finally forced myself to reach inside, I might pull out something that would change everything I thought I knew about my dad and about myself. I didn't check the pocket right away. I know that probably sounds strange, considering the note was basically a command, but something inside me locked up the second I touched that coat. It wasn't fear of what I'd find, not exactly. It was fear of the feeling that came with it, the sense that I'd just invited a ghost back into my home. So before I tell you what was actually hiding inside that pocket, I need you to understand what my life looked like before all of this. Before the box, before the note, before the truth started to unwind in front of me like a loose thread waiting to be pulled. Because the truth didn't show up out of nowhere. It had roots. It had echoes. It had warnings I didn't recognize until it was far too late. And it all starts with my dad, and the last year we ever spoke like the world wasn't about to fall apart. My dad's name was Michael Parker, and he was the kind of man people described as solid. Not flashy, not complicated, just steady. A mechanic by trade, a creature of habit. If you drove by his shop any weekday, You'd probably see him outside with a mug of black coffee, leaning on a customer's car like it was a friend. Growing up, that steadiness was my anchor. Other kids had fathers who missed recitals or forgot birthdays. Mine didn't. He wasn't perfect. He could be stubborn, quiet, and sometimes so withdrawn that I wondered what he was thinking, but he never forgot to show up for me. Our routine was simple. Sunday morning breakfast at a diner called Maggie's, one game night a week even when I went to college, and a phone call every Thursday evening where he'd pretend to understand my job and I'd pretend to understand carburetors. Grief is weird. It makes you remember tiny things that shouldn't matter, like how he always ordered the same thing at Maggie's: scrambled eggs, dry toast, and sausage links he'd cut into perfect little pieces before eating. I didn't realize how much I cherished those little details until suddenly they were only memories. Before the coat came back to me, before everything spiraled, my life felt manageable. Not happy, not after losing him, but steady in its own quiet way. I worked from my small dining table with my laptop propped on a stack of old textbooks to keep it eye level. My coffee maker sputtered every morning like it needed a pep talk. My fridge was basically yogurt, leftovers, and half a bottle of cheap white wine. My friends tried to drag me out on weekends, and sometimes I went, but mostly I stayed home. Grief makes the world too loud. What I remember most clearly is the silence. It wasn't heavy, the way people imagine grief. It was more like a soft hum, a blankness. Life was happening around me, and I was just watching. Calling my dad was part of my routine, and when that routine disappeared, it felt like someone had rearranged the furniture in my head. Still, I kept going. Emails, dishes, bills, laundry. Life moved forward whether I felt ready or not. I talked to my aunt more in those first few weeks than I had in years. She'd always been the unofficial keeper of family gossip, who was getting married, who was losing their job, who had mysteriously grown out hair after a weekend spa trip. Talking to her made me feel tethered to someone. But there was something she said one night that stuck with me. It was a Tuesday, late, and she was telling me how she planned to clean out Dad's shed once winter passed. "I'll let you know if I find anything important," she'd said casually. Then she added, almost too softly for me to hear, "He always had secrets tucked away. That man never traveled light." I laughed it off at the time. My dad? Secrets? Unless she meant the stash of candy bars he kept hidden from his doctor, the man was basically an open book. But later, lying in bed, those words rolled around in my head. He always had secrets tucked away. It didn't feel like a warning then. It just felt like something sentimental people say when they are emotional. But now I look back and wonder if she knew more than she told me. A few weeks after the funeral, my routine tried to settle again. I worked. I microwaved dinners. I rotated between the same 3 pairs of leggings because laundry felt like climbing a mountain. But the weight of his coat by the door grew heavier with each passing day. At first, I wore it because it comforted me. Then I stopped wearing it, but I kept it there. Then I stopped touching it, stopped even looking at it. Some people keep things forever because it helps them remember. Some people let go because holding on hurts too much. I was somewhere in between, clinging and repelling at the same time. One day, after I hung up from another well-meaning friend asking how I was holding up, I stood in front of the coat and stared at it so long that my coffee went cold in my hands. That's when I finally decided I needed space from the grief, and the coat had to go. I didn't want to throw it in the trash. That felt disrespectful, wrong, like I'd be erasing him. So I chose the thrift store, hoping someone else would find warmth and comfort in it the way I once had. Dropping it off felt like exhaling. I walked out of that thrift store lighter than I'd felt in months. For a little while, life actually settled. I can't say I was healing. Healing implies progress, and I wasn't sure I was moving in any direction at all, but I wasn't drowning either. I woke up with fewer tears in my eyes. I worked without losing track of what day it was. I even called my aunt one night just to talk instead of crying through the whole conversation. Slowly, painfully, things softened. I even found myself smiling sometimes, like the world was letting me breathe again. And then, a few tiny things began happening. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that set off alarms. Just little things. A wrench I didn't remember unpacking from Dad's toolbox was suddenly sitting on my counter. A voicemail came through one morning, just static, but it sounded oddly like the hum of his old truck. A set of keys I'd left on the table ended up hanging by the door. I kept brushing those things off. Grief fog, forgetfulness, coincidence. That's what people do when they are not ready to face something. They rationalize the strange until it feels ordinary. Then came the strange phone call. It was a Thursday, the day Dad and I always talked. Maybe that's why it rattled me so much. My phone rang around 8:30 p.m. unknown number. Normally I would ignore it. But something in me, something small and instinctive, made me answer. When I said hello, no one spoke at first. Just a faint rustling sound, like someone adjusting the phone. Then a breath, soft, shaky, almost familiar, and the line went dead. It wasn't enough to alarm me, but it was enough to make me sit in silence for a long while afterward, wondering why my hands were trembling if it meant nothing. Looking back, that call was the first true warning sign, but I didn't understand it then. I just chalked it up to a wrong number and tried to forget the way it made my stomach twist. Life resumed. Days passed. Nights blurred. The coat faded from my mind. And then I opened my door to that box, the one with my name written in bold marker, the one containing the coat I had let go of, the one topped with the sticky note that changed everything. Check the pocket. That post-it didn't just tell me to look. It told me someone else had already looked. Someone had taken that coat into their hands, searched through it, and then gone out of their way to send it straight back to me. People don't do that for no reason. Someone wanted me to find something. Something my dad left behind. Something he didn't want to explain while he was alive. And the worst part? A part of me already knew there was something inside that pocket. Because he always kept something there. Something I used to tease him about. Why do you keep that old thing? I'd ask. He'd just smile, a quiet, secretive smile, and say, never know when it might matter, M. I thought he meant the pack of gum he sometimes carried, or the spare house key, or the photo of my mom he used to tuck into every wallet he ever owned. I didn't realize he might have been hiding something more, something meant for me, something that didn't want to stay buried. As I stood there in my apartment, coat draped over my arms like a sleeping animal, the silence pressed in around me. I hadn't checked the pocket yet, but deep down, I knew whatever was inside that coat wasn't going to be simple or sentimental or comforting. It was going to be the beginning of something bigger, darker, and far more complicated than grief. And part of me, a part one didn't want to admit existed, knew that once I reached inside that pocket, there would be no turning back. Because secrets don't stay secrets once they are pulled into the light. And my dad, my steady, ordinary, predictable dad, had apparently kept a secret big enough for someone to send me a warning. And that was the small, cold truth settling in my chest. I wasn't just grieving a father anymore. I was about to meet the version of him he never let me see. I didn't open the pocket that night. You'd think I would have. The note practically begged me to. But grief makes you cautious in strange, irrational ways. I set the coat on the back of a chair, walked past it like it might bite me, and crawled into bed with the light still on. Sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured that yellow post-it, the blocky handwriting, the way the pocket seemed to hang heavier than the rest of the coat. I kept thinking, who touched it? Who wrote that? Why now? Why me? Questions with no answers feel like sand under your skin. The longer you sit still, the deeper they bury themselves. Eventually, I gave up on sleep and just lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to the low hum of the refrigerator through the wall. Around 3 a.m., I finally drifted off. I wish I could say it was peaceful, but my dreams were muddled and frantic, shapes moving in shadows, footsteps behind me, my dad's voice calling my name from somewhere I couldn't find. By morning, I felt hungover from nothing but fear. I made coffee, burned my tongue on it, and sat down in front of the coat. That's all I did for a full minute, just sat there, elbows on my knees, staring at it like a wild animal I needed to approach slowly. Okay, I whispered to no one. Just do it. I reached for the inside pocket, the one he'd always protected with a little pat every time he hung the coat up. It felt stiff under my fingers, like something thick was tucked against the lining. I took a deep breath, slid my hand inside, and froze when there was a loud, abrupt knock at my door. Not a gentle neighbor knock, not a delivery drop. 3 heavy knocks, evenly spaced, like someone wanted to be sure I heard them. My heart jumped into my throat. My apartment didn't get unexpected visitors. Not at 9 a.m. Not the morning after a coat with a warning note arrived. I stood up slowly. The knock came again. Same rhythm, same weight. I walked to the door, looked through the peephole, and my entire body unclenched when I saw it was just my landlord, Mr. Jensen. He was in his late 60s, thin, always wearing flannel shirts, perpetually smelling like peppermint and dust. He only came by in person when something needed fixing, which confused me because I hadn't put in a maintenance request. I opened the door. "Morning, Emily," he said, offering a small nod. Hi. Everything okay?" "Yeah. Sorry to bother you this early." He shifted his weight, clearing his throat. I wanted to ask if you've noticed anything strange around the building lately." My stomach tightened. Strange like what? He rubbed the back of his neck, eyes drifting down the hallway. "Well, a couple of tenants mentioned someone hanging around late last night. Tall guy, dark jacket, hood up. Didn't recognize him." A chill ran up my spine. "Did he do anything?" I asked. Didn't seem threatening. Just standing near the mailboxes for a while. When someone went down to check their mail, he left. Figured I should mention it. I swallowed, my mouth suddenly dry. Did anyone get a good look at him? A few people tried, but he kept his head down. Mr. Jensen paused. "Just keep your eyes open. And if you see anything off, call me." I nodded. He lingered a moment, studying my face like he sensed something was wrong, then gave a small wave and shuffled off. When his footsteps disappeared down the stairs, I closed the door and leaned against it. A stranger in a dark jacket, hanging around the mailboxes. The same night the coat arrived. I tried telling myself it was coincidence, weird timing, nothing more, but the part of my brain that still remembered the box waiting at my door felt the opposite. Something was happening, something that involved my dad, and something that apparently involved me. I went back to the coat. My fingers were trembling, but this time I didn't hesitate. I reached inside the pocket and curled my hand around something rigid, rectangular, wrapped in what felt like a thin cloth. When I pulled it out, my breath hitched. It was a small leather-bound notebook, the edges worn, the spine cracked. Dark brown, almost black. No title, no initials, just a thin elastic band holding it closed. My dad didn't keep journals, or at least I'd never known him to. He wasn't the type to write things down. He kept everything in his head until he forgot it or replaced it with something else. This little book didn't fit him. But the worst part? It wasn't the only thing inside the pocket. A second item slid loose and fell into my lap, a key. Not a house key, not a car key, something different. Old-fashioned, metal, long, almost ornamental, like the kind you'd see for a storage unit from decades ago or a basement lock in a building older than memory. It was cool to the touch, heavy, deliberately placed. I stared at it for a long moment, my thoughts scattered, drifting, trying to form questions that refused to assemble into anything coherent. The last thing I pulled out was a folded piece of paper. Again, not my father's handwriting. It was the same blocky script as the post-it. "He didn't want you to have this, but you need it now. Page 17. That was it. No explanation, no sender, no signature, just instructions. And the worst part? My dad clearly hadn't put that note there. Someone else had. Someone who got close enough to his coat, long enough to read through the pocket, long enough to see the notebook inside. My chest tightened. Whoever wrote that note, they knew something about my dad I didn't. Something he never planned to share. I carried the notebook to my couch and sat down slowly. It felt wrong, like I was about to pry open a memory that didn't belong to me. But the curiosity, or maybe the dread, was stronger than the hesitation. I slid the elastic band off and let the notebook fall open in my hands. The first few pages were blank. Then came small, uneven handwriting, my father's. I recognized it instantly. The loops, the slant, the little pressure marks where he pressed too hard. But the content wasn't what I expected. No dates, no full sentences, just fragments, incomplete thoughts, quick notations like a man scribbling in a hurry. Don't let them find her. Check every 2 weeks. Change lock, too risky. No one can know. My breath caught. Huh? Who was her? Before I let my imagination run wild, I flipped to page 17. The number was written at the top in bold ink, circled twice. The page held only a single sentence, written shakily. If anything happens to me, start with the key. The room felt suddenly colder. I reread the sentence over and over, waiting for the words to shift into something that made sense. But they didn't. They just kept ringing louder. Start with the key. My dad, my steady, predictable, boringly normal dad, had left behind a cryptic notebook and a key that felt like a puzzle piece from someone else's life. And someone, the writer of the note, believed he never intended for me to have it. I sat back, staring at the items spread across my coffee table. The notebook, the cryptic note, the old key, the coat that had somehow found its way back to me. Each item felt like part of a story I didn't know I was connected to. Something was wrong, very wrong, and the feeling that I'd brushed off for weeks, the strange little moments, the odd silences, the sense of being watched, began knitting themselves into a pattern I didn't want to see. My father had been hiding something, and someone out there, someone who'd crept around my building in a dark hood, wanted to make sure his secret didn't stay buried. As I stared at the key glinting under the living room light, one quiet truth settled into my mind like a stone sinking underwater. This wasn't just grief anymore. This was the beginning of something else, something dangerous, something deliberate, and something that had been set in motion long before the coat ever reached my doorstep. And page 17 was only the start. As the morning light filtered through my curtains, warming the room despite the cold not growing inside me, I realized I wasn't sure I wanted answers, but the answers were coming anyway, because secrets don't knock on your door unless they want to be found. And this one had traveled all the way back to me, wrapped in wool, sealed in a box, tucked beside a warning. Whatever my dad had been hiding, it wasn't going to stay hidden much longer. If my father hid this from me for years, what else did he lie about? I didn't move for a long time after I read page 17. The key lay on the coffee table, catching a thin slice of morning sunlight, and the notebook sat open beside it like a wound I wasn't ready to close. You know that feeling when the ground shifts beneath you, not enough to make you fall, but enough to tell you that something you trusted isn't solid anymore? That's exactly how it felt. Like the version of my dad I'd built my whole life around had hairline cracks I never noticed until now. Every breath felt shallow. Every sound in my apartment felt too loud. Eventually, I forced myself to pick up the key. It was heavier than it looked, cold enough to sting my fingers. There were numbers faintly scratched into the side, 1096, as if someone had used a pocket knife to carve them. Not cleanly, not professionally, almost desperately. I swallowed hard. A key carved with a number, a notebook filled with warnings, a stranger in a hoodie lingering near my mailboxes. A coat returned to me by someone who clearly wanted me to look deeper. All of it pointed to something I didn't understand yet, but the terror blooming in my chest told me I was about to. My first instinct was to call my aunt, but I hesitated. If she knew anything, she had already kept it from me. If she didn't, I wasn't sure I wanted to pull her into something that already felt dangerous. So I called the only person who had always known how to make sense of things, my best friend, Sarah. She picked up on the second ring, her voice still raspy from sleep. You okay? I opened my mouth to say yes, then the truth rushed out instead. Sarah, my dad left something. A notebook. A key. Someone sent his coat back to me with a message. There was a long silence, broken only by her shifting in bed. Okay, she said slowly, start from the beginning. So I told her about the coat, the note, the pocket, the stranger in the hallway. She didn't interrupt. She didn't laugh or tell me I was overreacting. She listened the way someone listens when they love you. When I finally stopped talking, the room felt unbearably quiet. Emily, she said softly, this sounds serious. I know. What are you going to do? I glanced back at the notebook. I'm going to find out what the key opens. That means going somewhere. Yes. And you don't even know where. My voice cracked. No, I don't. Another pause. Then Sarah said something I didn't expect. I'm coming over. No, Sarah. I'm coming. You shouldn't do this alone. And before I could argue again, she hung up. When she arrived, she wore sweats, a messy bun, and the serious look she saved for emergencies. I let her in, and her eyes immediately landed on the coat draped over the chair. That's it? She asked. I nodded. She approached it slowly, like it might crumble or bite. When she saw the key, her eyebrows knit together. Emily, this doesn't look like something your dad would use. I know. And the notebook? I handed it to her. She flipped through quickly, then stopped at page 17. If anything happens to me, start with the key. She exhaled. God, M. I sank onto the couch, hugging my knees. He never kept secrets from me. Not like this. Not something that feels, I don't know, dangerous. She sat beside me. Your dad wasn't the type to write things like this unless he had a reason. But what reason? He was a mechanic. He went to work, came home, watched football, ate the same cereal he'd eaten since 1989. He wasn't. My voice cracked. He wasn't someone who hid things. Sarah's hand rested gently on my back. Maybe he hid them to protect you. I looked at her, throat tight. Protect me from what? She didn't have an answer. Neither did I. After a few long minutes, Sarah leaned forward and picked up the key. We need to figure this out. Where do we start? The number carved into it, I said. 1096. It could be. I don't know. A box number. A locker. Storage unit, she suggested. People use old keys for those sometimes. The idea hit me so hard I felt cold. My dad had rented a storage unit years ago. Somewhere off the highway outside Columbus, a metal box full of who knows what that he never wanted me to help sort. He always said, it's just old junk, Em. Nothing worth your time. But what if that wasn't true? What if that storage unit wasn't junk at all? I grabbed my laptop and looked up storage facilities in his area. There were 3 possibilities. One of them, quick store self-storage, had unit numbers in the 1,000 range. My pulse quickened. Sarah glanced at the screen. You think that's the one? It has to be. You going to drive 8 hours to Ohio? She asked gently. I have to. She nodded without hesitation. Then I'm going with you. I shook my head. No, Sarah, this might be dangerous. I don't even know what's in that storage unit. I don't know who sent the coat. I don't know who was watching my building. That's exactly why you're not going alone. Her voice was firm. This isn't optional, M. And that's when the nausea kicked in, because she was right. Whatever was waiting for me in Ohio felt bigger than I was emotionally prepared for. But I knew I had no choice. If I didn't go, I'd spend the rest of my life wondering why my father left behind a notebook filled with warnings and a key he clearly feared someone else might find. While we planned the trip, packing bags, charging phones, printing directions, another realization struck me hard enough to stop me mid-step. What if someone comes back for the coat? I whispered. Sarah turned toward me, eyes widening slightly. You think they might? They already knew where I lived. They left a note. They sent me something I donated miles away. They were in the building last night. My voice cracked. What if they think I know more than I do? Sarah walked over to the coat, studying it like she expected someone to jump out from behind it. Well, whatever they are after, they can't have it now. She gestured to the notebook and key. You have everything. She didn't say the part both of us were thinking. That also meant someone might come looking for me. We hit the road by early afternoon. Sarah drove at first because my hands were shaking too badly to grip the wheel. The highway stretched ahead in long gray ribbons, the sun glaring through the windshield, my thoughts loud and tangled. About an hour into the drive, I opened the notebook again. Sarah glanced at me. You sure you want to read more while we're moving? I need to know, I whispered. So I turned the pages slowly, and what I found made the air inside the car grow colder, heavier. More fragments. Don't trust her. She's safer if she doesn't know. If they ask, deny everything. Lost track of him. Getting too close. Move her. Risky. Move her. There it was again. The mysterious her my dad wrote about repeatedly. Who was she? A relative I didn't know? A neighbor? Someone I'd never even met? Oh, was it me? That thought made my stomach churn. I flipped to another page. Locker 1096. Last resort. I felt the blood drain from my face. Sarah noticed instantly. Emily, what is it? I turned the notebook so she could see. Her jaw tightened. Last resort, she repeated. That doesn't sound like junk. No, I whispered. It doesn't. I reached another page, this one smudged, as if he'd written it while his hands were shaking. Time's running out. And below it, I hope she forgives me. I stared at those words until they blurred. My throat ached, and I pressed the heel of my hand against my eyes. Sarah reached over and squeezed my arm. You didn't do anything wrong. But it didn't feel that simple. Secrets create guilt even when you're not the one keeping them. As I flipped through the pages, a faint sheet of paper slipped out from the back cover, folded tightly, like it had been added later. This one wasn't in my dad's handwriting. It was typed, small font, cold, official-looking. At the top was a letterhead I didn't recognize, Wellington Research Group. Under it, a line of text. Confidential, subject records, do not distribute. My hands trembled as I unfolded the rest. There were names, dates, a list of incidents, and one line near the bottom that made my heart slam against my ribs. Subject associated, Emily Parker. Status, unconfirmed. Observation required. The car swerved slightly as I gasped. Sarah tightened her grip on the wheel. What? What happened? I shoved the paper toward her. Read this. She glanced quickly during a straight stretch of road. Her eyebrows shot up. What the hell is Wellington Research Group? I don't know. Why is your name on a confidential report? I don't know. Emily, Sarah's voice lowered. This isn't normal. This looks like some kind of government file or... I know. I snapped, panic rising in my throat. She quieted instantly, not offended, just concerned. I pressed both hands to my temples. Why was my name on a list? Why did my dad have this? Why didn't he tell me? What was he afraid of? What got him involved with something so dark he felt the need to hide a key and warn me through a notebook? The questions swarmed until I could barely breathe. I looked at Sarah, my voice barely a whisper. What if my dad didn't just die of a heart attack? The words hung in the air. Heavy, awful, unavoidable. Sarah swallowed hard. Emily, do you think someone hurt him? I shut my eyes, fighting the sting behind them. I don't know anymore. Everything I thought I knew feels wrong. My voice trembled as I whispered the fear that had been clawing at me since the coach arrived. What if he died because of this, because of whatever he was trying to protect me from? Sarah didn't answer, and the silence that followed. That silence was the lowest point, the moment the grief cracked open and something darker began to seep through. Because for the first time since my father died, I wasn't just mourning him. I was terrified of the truth he'd left behind. And we were still hours away from discovering how deep that truth went. The road stretched out ahead like a long gray thread, unraveling across states and miles and answers I wasn't sure I was ready for. The notebook lay open on my lap, the pages trembling with every bump in the highway. Beside me, Sarah kept her eyes focused, both hands on the wheel, sensing the shift inside me long before I admitted it. Fear had been the loudest voice in my head for days, but somewhere between Colorado and Ohio, it started to soften. Not because anything made more sense, if anything, everything was wise, but because fear only controls you until the truth becomes more important. I didn't want to be afraid anymore. I wanted to understand. I wanted to know what my father had been facing alone. Why he believed he had to hide this from me. Why someone was watching my building. Why a stranger had the authority, or the nerve, to put my name into a confidential file. Why a coat I donated ended up back on my doorstep like a message sent from a grave. By the time we passed the Welcome to Ohio sign, the sun dipped toward the horizon as we pulled into a small motel on the outskirts of Columbus. It was the kind of place with flickering neon signs and a front office that smelled faintly like old air freshener and coffee from hours ago. We checked in without conversation. The clock didn't look up once. I didn't care. Inside the room, I sat on one of the beds and let the notebook rest beside me. I waited for the grief to pull me under again, but instead something calmer filled me, not peace exactly, but a kind of emotional stillness. The eye of a storm. Sarah kicked off her shoes and sat opposite me. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded slowly, not trusting my voice yet. She studied me for a long moment. "You look different." "Different how?" "Like you're stronger, maybe? Or like you finally decided something." I exhaled, long and shaky. "I have." She didn't interrupt. She didn't need to. She knew I was finally ready to say the thing I'd been denying since the coat came back. "My dad didn't want me involved," I said quietly. "But someone else decided I should be. Someone sent the coat back. Someone wrote that note. Someone stood in my building last night." Sarah nodded. "And if they think I'm part of this," I continued, "if they think I know more than I do, then I need to catch up. I need to understand why my name is on that file. Why he wrote that notebook. Why he hit a key like it was the last thing keeping me alive." My breath caught, but I kept speaking. "I'm not backing down now." Sarah leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You don't have to convince me. I'm here." Her voice was gentle but firm. It grounded me. I didn't tell her the quiet thoughts slipping through my mind. If someone is responsible for what happened to him, I'm going to find out. Not for revenge, not yet, but for truth. For closure. For the version of myself that still felt like a child trying to understand why the world suddenly shifted. I opened the notebook again, flipping through the pages with new eyes. Before, I was drowning in fear, reading each line like a warning I wasn't prepared for. Now I saw something else woven through the fragments, patterns, connections, a trail of breadcrumbs in my father's rushed, uneven handwriting. He hadn't written details. No names or locations. Nothing obvious. But the repetition told its own story. Check every 2 weeks. Don't trust her. They're getting close. She can't know yet. Move her. Over and over. Her. 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 Every time I saw the word, my heart twisted. "You think her is you?" Sarah asked quietly, reading my face. "I don't know, maybe." She frowned. "But he says move her. Protect her. Don't let them find her." "If that's about you, wouldn't you remember something like that?" A chill threaded down my spine. Unless it happened when I was too young to remember. Or unless he hid something from me even more effectively than I realized. "I need answers," I whispered. "And I think they're in that storage unit." Sarah nodded. "Then tomorrow, first thing, we go." I closed the notebook gently. The weight of it felt different now, less like a threat, more like a compass. A broken one, maybe, but still pointing somewhere. That night, sleep still didn't come, but it wasn't the same restless fear of the night before. My thoughts were clearer, focused. If my father had been involved with something dangerous enough to hide keys and files, then it wasn't random. It wasn't meaningless. It wasn't just grief. Someone had a reason. And I wasn't going to be another piece they could move around without explanation. Every so often, I'd glance at Sarah asleep in the other bed. Her breathing was steady, comforting. It reminded me I wasn't completely alone, even if the truth waiting for me tomorrow might change the shape of my life forever. Around 4 a.m., I sat up and whispered into the dim room. Dad, what did you get yourself into? The silence didn't answer, but the question itself anchored something inside me. Whatever he was hiding, he hid it because he loved me, because he thought he was protecting me, because he trusted himself more than he trusted the world around him. And maybe he was right. Maybe the world outside that coat, outside that notebook, was darker than I wanted to believe. But he wasn't here anymore, and the protection he tried to wrap around me like armor had cracked open the moment he died. Now the truth was showing through, and I wasn't turning away. By morning, the sense of purpose was almost startling in its clarity. Sarah sat beside me at the motel's tiny table as I spread everything out. The notebook, the key, the typed document, the coat folded neatly beside them. Let's plan, I said. Okay. Step 1, I continued. We go to Quick Store Self-Storage and see if Unit 1096 is real. Sarah nodded. And if it is? I swallowed hard. We open it. And if someone tries to stop us? The question lingered in the air. She wasn't exaggerating. We had every reason to think someone else wanted that unit kept quiet. Instead of panicking, I felt something sharp settle into place inside me. Resolve. Not anger, not yet, but the beginnings of something fierce. If someone tries to stop us, I said quietly, then they are going to have to explain why. Sarah let out a slow breath, then leaned back. I'm with you, but we need to be smart. Careful. No rushing in blind. I know. Which leads us to step 2, she said. We take pictures of everything in the notebook. Every page, every word. If something happens to it, we'll still have the information. I nodded, already pulling out my phone. And step 3? I asked. We don't tell anyone else where we're going. I hesitated. What about my aunt? Not until we know what we're dealing with. She was right. I didn't want to draw anyone else into something they might not be ready for. And step 4, she asked gently. This part took longer for me to admit, but I felt it in my chest. Quiet, heavy, unavoidable. If whoever sent the coat back contacts me again, I paused, steadying my breath. I'm going to answer. Sarah stared at me. Emily, that could be dangerous. I know, I whispered, but I'm not running from them anymore. If they wanted to hurt me, they would have done it already. Instead, they led me here. And you trust that? No, but I'm going to use it. A subtle edge entered my voice, not aggression, not anger, but a kind of determination I didn't know I had. I want to know who they are, and I want to know what they think I should have now. I'm done hiding. Sarah nodded, slowly and reluctantly. Then I'm with you. Every step. Her support settled something deep inside me. Later that morning, while she showered, I sat on the edge of my bed with the key in my hand. The metal was cool, smooth, deliberate, like it had been crafted for a single, specific purpose. My father had written only one clear instruction in the entire notebook. Start with the key. Not open the unit. Not find the truth. Just that. Start. That word pulsed in my mind. A beginning. An opening. A shift. Maybe my father had been preparing for this moment long before he died. Maybe he'd always known the past would catch up to me, even if he never wanted it to. A quiet resolve tightened in my chest. If he had carried this burden alone, I wasn't going to run from the weight of it now. Someone killed the man I knew. Even someone took pieces of him, fear, secrecy, desperation, and forced him to hide things from the person he loved most. That wasn't something I could walk away from. Not anymore. When Sarah stepped out of the bathroom, towel in her hair, she caught the look on my face and paused. You ready? She asked. I nodded once. More than I was yesterday. We packed our things, checked out of the motel, and loaded the car. The sky was pale, washed out blue, thin clouds drifting at the edges. It was the kind of morning that feels deceptively peaceful, like the world is holding its breath. As we pulled onto the highway, the notebook on my lap again, the key in my hand, I whispered something quietly, almost unconsciously. Dad, I'm coming for the truth. Whether that truth would heal me or break me apart, I didn't know. But I wasn't turning back. Not now. Not ever. Because the moment I chose to follow that key, the story stopped being about grief and started being about discovery. Raw, painful, dangerous discovery. And deep down, beneath the fear and confusion, a quiet ember of something sharper glowed inside me. If someone hurt him, they're going to regret underestimating his daughter. Quick-store self-storage sat at the end of a long service road, half hidden behind bare winter trees. Square metal buildings. Rows of identical roll-up doors. Everything silent in that way industrial places get. No wind, no birds, just the hum of fluorescent bulbs bleeding into daylight. Saw parked near the office. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. The air between us was already tight, electric. I held the key in my fist. Cold, heavy. I swear it pulsed with every heartbeat. The office door dinged when we stepped inside. A man looked up from behind a counter, late 40s, balding, eyes tied in a way that told me he'd been awake too long. Help you? He asked. I swallowed. Yes, I need access to a unit. 1096. His eyebrows lifted slightly. That's yours? No, I said honestly. My father's. What's the name on the account? Michael Parker. He typed. Slow. Each click made my stomach clench harder. Finally, he frowned at the screen. Huh. My pulse spiked. Huh. I echoed. It's active, he said, but hasn't been opened in years. Payments prepaid through next summer. That hit like a punch. My dad had paid ahead. Long ahead. Planning for something. Can I access it? I asked. He hesitated. Well, technically, without being listed. I held up the key. I think he wanted me to. The man stayed at it. At me. Then at the computer again. After a long moment, he sighed. Units down the third row. On the left. He handed me a clipboard. Sign here. Liability waiver. I scribbled my name with a hand that wasn't steady. Then we walked. The sky felt heavier with each step, as if the weather understood what waited behind that metal door. We stopped at 1096. The number was faded, scratched, like someone had tried to scrape it off and gave up halfway. Sal whispered, You okay? No, I said, but I'm ready. I slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. One time, a metallic click. The padlock dropped into my hand. I lifted the door. The smell hit feist, dust, old wood, cold air trap for years. Light spilled into a space much larger than I expected. Not piles of junk. Not forgotten furniture. A single large metal trunk sat in the center. Nothing else. Just that trunk. Gray. Industrial. Latches on both sides. A faint stencil across the top. WIG. Property Archive. My breath caught. Wellington Research Group. The name from the document. The name tied to me. Emily. Sarah whispered, stepping closer. What is this? I couldn't answer. I approached the trunk slowly, my footsteps echoing off concrete. My father's handwriting flashed in my mind. Last resort. This trunk was his last resort. My fingers hovered over the latches. Cold metal. Slightly rusted. Wait, Sarah said softly, but I shook my head. I opened the trunk, and everything changed. Inside were files. Stacks of them. Manila folders, rubber-banded bundles, Polaroids clipped to documents. So many pages it looked like someone had emptied an entire office into one trunk. But the things that froze my blood were the photos. The top one was a picture of my father, taken from a distance. Outside his shop. Zoomed in. Blurred around the edges like a surveillance photo. The next was taken inside our old house, my childhood home. A shot through the front window. Of me, coloring at the kitchen table. Maybe 8 years old. My knees almost buckled. Emily, Sarah whispered, Oh my God. I dug deeper. More photos. Different ages. Different moments. Me at school. Me on the playground. Me at a grocery store with my dad. Me walking into my college dorm. Hundreds of them. Trapped. 4 years. My hands shook violently as I grabbed a folder from the stack. Inside, typed pages. Charts. A signature at the top. Wellington Research Group. Subject Study 3A. Name, Emily Parker. Status, observation in progress. Age, 3 years old. First entry. Age, 32 years old. Last entry. My heart felt like it cracked open. 30 years. They had watched me for 30 years. I wasn't just connected. I was the subject. What the hell is this? Sa demanded, flipping through pages. They monitored your whole life. Something caught my eye. A section labeled Notes, Field Reports. I read the first line aloud. Primary Protective Guardian, Michael Parker. My breath left me. My dad wasn't just keeping me safe emotionally. He had literally been assigned, or forced, to protect me from something. Or someone. A paper slipped loose from the stack. Handwritten. Not printed. Not filed. My father's handwriting. A letter. I unfolded it with trembling hands. Emily, if you're reading this, then I wasn't enough. I'm sorry. I tried to keep them away. I tried to hide you. I tried to stop what they wanted. But they never stopped watching. Not even when I left the program. Not even when I warned them to stay away. They want you back. They think you're still viable. Run if you can. Fight if you must. But don't trust anyone connected to Wellington. Not even the ones who helped me. Especially not them. I love you. More than you ever understood. Dad. The world tilted. The storage unit blurred. My chest tightened so sharply I couldn't breathe. They want you back. Sarah whispered. Back from what? From who? Before I could answer, before I could even think, a loud metallic bang echoed behind us. We spun around. The storage unit door was rolling down. Someone was closing us in. Sarah lunged, but the door slammed shut with a deafening finality. Darkness swallowed us except for a thin strip of light near the floor. My heartbeat roared in my ears. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. Just outside. A man's voice, muffled through the metal. Emily Parker. I froze. He waited. Breathing. Listening. Open the door, Sarah shouted. Who are you? Silence. Then, you shouldn't have come here. Not angry. Not surprised. Just inevitable. He kept speaking. Your father warned you to stay away. I knocked the metal trunk lid shut, shoving the files back inside, hands frantic. Sarah hissed, we need a way out. But there was no back entrance. No side door. Just concrete walls and one sealed metal door with a stranger on the other side. I grabbed the key. The trunk. The notebook. Everything I could reach. Another voice appeared at the door. A woman's this time. Sharper. She has the files, the woman said. She read them. There's no going back now. Open it. No, the man replied. We need authorization. We don't have time for authorization. Stop. He sounded annoyed. She's the only remaining subject from the original study. If we rush this, we lose everything. My stomach lurched. Subject. Again that word. Then the woman spoke directly through the door. Emily, your father was wrong about us. We aren't here to hurt you. Then why close the door? Sarah snapped. To protect you, the woman said calmly. There are others on their way who won't bother negotiating. My skin crawled. I whispered to Sarah, we need a weapon. The trunk latch. The metal pole in the corner. Something. Anything. The footsteps outside grew louder. More people. Gravel crunching. The man's voice was back. Urgent now. Emily, listen to me. This isn't what you think. Your father didn't die of a heart attack. A car screeched somewhere close. Shouting erupted. Boots running. Chaos breaking open just feet away. Then, bang. A gunshot. I screamed and ducked instinctively as Sarah grabbed my arm. Another voice roared outside. Go. Grab her. More gunshots. Metal cracking. Something heavy slammed against the unit door. Sarah yanked me behind the trunk, both of us crouched low, shaking. The woman outside shouted, "Get the door open. Now!" The man yelled something back, words we couldn't make out. Then another explosion of sound rattled the entire building. My hands clamped over my ears. More footsteps, more shouting. Then, a single, sharp command. "Break it." A grinding sound. Metal straining. They were forcing the door open. I felt my pulse in every inch of my body. Sarah grabbed my hands. "Emily, whatever happens, run." I shook my head violently. "I'm not leaving you." "You might have to." The metal shrieked loudly. Light burst through a widening crack. Voices spilled in. Chaos, panic, orders. Sarah squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. The door buckled. Then, it flew open. Light blinded me. Figures filled the doorway. And in that blinding, chaotic moment, as men and women surged toward us, as my heart screamed in my ears, as everything my father tried to hide finally crashed into the present, I understood one thing with absolute clarity. Nothing about my life was ever going to be the same again. And whoever these people were, whoever had hunted me for decades, they had finally found me. The moment the door blew open, I thought it was over, that I'd be dragged out, swallowed into the same darkness my father tried to outrun. But what happened next didn't feel like a climax. It felt like a blur. A frantic, overwhelming scramble that would later replay in my mind in broken pieces, like a deck of memories thrown into the air. The people who'd come for us weren't one group. They were two. The first, the man and woman who'd spoken through the door, was shoved aside by a second group dressed in dark jackets with tactical gear. Not military, not police, something in between. Something unofficial but trained. Chaos erupted. Shouting, weapons drawn, orders barked from both sides. All I remember clearly is Sarah grabbing my wrist and pulling me toward the back of the unit, searching desperately for a way out where none existed. Over here," she cried, pointing to the far left corner. A vent. Small, rusty, barely large enough for a human. But the screws were old. Loose. We didn't have a choice. While the two groups clashed outside the unit, shouting about containment and authorized retrieval, Sarah kicked the vent cover hard enough for it to clang off the wall. "Go!" she yelled. I hesitated. She pushed me. "Emily, move." So I crawled. The tunnel behind the vent wasn't tall enough to stand in. Cold concrete brushed my elbows and knees as I slid forward, scraping my palms on the rough surface. I could hear Sarah behind me, breath shaking, whispering, "Keep going, keep going, keep going." Gunshots echoed. Then the unmistakable crash of something heavy hitting metal. A voice yelled my name. Not Sarah's, not mine inside my head. A stranger who somehow knew me. We didn't look back. We crawled until the tunnel bent sharply, opening into a narrow space between two storage buildings. We stumbled out into the cold air, gasping, shaking, tears stinging our eyes. And we ran. I don't remember reaching the car. I only remember the way the gravel felt under my shoes, the way my breath tore through my chest, the way Sarah shouted, "Get in," while fumbling with her keys. The engine roared. We peeled out of the lot as figures burst from behind the buildings, some chasing us, some chasing each other, none of them slowing. We didn't stop, didn't breathe, didn't speak. Not until the storage facility disappeared in the rearview mirror, and the adrenaline crashed so hard I nearly collapsed into the seat. We drove, nowhere specific, just away. Minutes blurred into miles, miles into hours. I couldn't tell. Time stretched and folded until everything felt unreal. At one point, Sarah pulled into an empty church parking lot, turned off the engine, let the silence settle. For a long time, we sat there without talking. My body trembled uncontrollably, the leftover shock of fear, exhaustion, disbelief. Sarah covered her face with her hands, elbows resting on the steering wheel. Finally, she spoke. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Emily, what was that?" I didn't answer. I didn't know how. Instead, I opened the notebook, the same notebook my father hid inside the coat, the one we risked everything to retrieve, and saw the words he'd written. Run if you can. Fight if you must. Tears blurred the ink. I think, I finally whispered, that my dad wasn't protecting me from a secret. He was protecting me from people. Sarah turned her head, eyes red, expression softening. You think those two groups were both after you? I nodded slowly. That vice pair, they didn't want to hurt us. They tried to talk to you. And the second group? She didn't have to answer. We both knew. They were intercepting, I whispered, like they were waiting for someone to retrieve the files. We fell silent again. The parking lot was utterly still, windless, empty, but inside me, everything churned, fear and anger and an aching kind of grief I hadn't expected. Because now I understood the truth my father spent years trying to keep from me. I wasn't just his daughter. I was a variable in someone else's experiment, a subject, a line on a file, a project someone wanted to resurrect. He didn't hide the truth because he doubted me. He hid it because he thought it was the only way to save me. And now he was gone, the last barrier between me and a past I didn't ask for. A shattering realization settled over me. No one was coming to protect me now. I had to protect myself. Sarah insisted we find a safe place to rest, but nowhere felt safe. Hotels had cameras. Rest stops had too many strangers. Even the car felt like a target. Eventually, we ended up in another motel, far from the one we'd stayed in before. Cheap, rundown, anonymous. Inside, the quiet felt suffocating. I sat on the edge of the bed, the trunk's photographs spread across the comforter, hundreds of moments I never knew someone captured. Me as a child. A teenager, a college student, sometimes alone, sometimes with my father, sometimes oblivious. Each photo was a violation I didn't remember living through. Saya sat beside me, touching one of the images cautiously. I'm so sorry. I shook my head. It's not your fault. I know, but I'm still sorry. For everything. For what they did to you. For what your dad had to carry. Her voice cracked. I swallowed hard, my throat tight. He carried this alone for so many years. He must have been terrified. And he still chose to protect me. That's love, she whispered. But it cost him everything. The room felt unbearably heavy. I closed the notebook, slid it into my bag, and zipped it shut. Sarah watched me carefully. What now? I inhaled slowly, deeply, letting the decision wash through me. We go home, I said. Her eyebrows lifted. Home? After all this? Yes. I kept my voice calm. We regroup. We think. We figure out our next step. Running aimlessly won't help. And the people chasing you. They found me once. They'll try again. Exactly, she argued. That's why we stop acting like prey. She fell silent. I continued, my voice steadier than I felt. My dad gave me everything I need to understand this. The notebook, the files, the truth. Now it's my responsibility to figure out why they want me and what they think I am. Sarah nodded slowly. And you're not doing it alone. Emotion tightened my chest. I know. For the first time since this began, the panic in me eased. Not gone, but less sharp. Shed. Manageable. Because the truth was finally out of the shadows. And once truth is exposed, fear loses some of its power. We slept in shifts, though sleep was generous with neither of us. By dawn, exhaustion numbed the fear into something dull and quiet. On the drive back toward Colorado, I watched the sun rise through the windshield, a thin streak of gold cutting across the dark horizon. It felt symbolic. Not hopeful exactly, but steady. The world wasn't ending. My life wasn't over. I had survived the storage unit, survived the confrontation, survived the realization that my past was built on secrets. And now I had something I didn't have before. Understanding. Even broken understanding was better than blindness. My father didn't die the way I believed. Maybe he didn't choose the life he lived, but he chose how he'd love me fiercely, protectively, desperately, even when it meant lying. I wasn't angry with him anymore, only heartbroken. He did everything he could, and now it was my turn. When we crossed back into Colorado, something inside me settled. Not peace, but direction. A path forward. I didn't know what Wellington Research Group wanted. Didn't know why I was on their list. Didn't know whether the people from the storage facility were enemies or reluctant allies. But I knew one thing. I wasn't running anymore. Not from secrets. Not from fear. Not from whatever future my father tried to shield me from. When Sarah pulled into my apartment complex, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "You ready?" she asked softly. I looked up at my building, at the hallway where someone once stood in a dark jacket, watching. At the door where a box containing my father's coat once waited. At the hook where that coat still hung, unchanged, quietly holding the beginning of all this. "Yes," I whispered. And as I stepped out of the car, heart racing but steady, I felt the story shifting from shock into acceptance. I wasn't the same Emily who donated her father's coat. I was someone new now. Someone my father believed could survive the truth. Someone who would finish what he started, even if she didn't yet know how. And the first step was walking back into my own home with my eyes fully open. Walking back into my apartment felt different than I expected. Not triumphant, not terrified, just real. It was the first time since my father died that the space didn't feel like a museum dedicated to what I'd lost, but a place I could decide what came next. The coat still hung on the hook by the door, quiet, ordinary, unchanged by the chaos it had somehow carried back to me. I stood in front of it for a long time, fingers brushing the cuff where the fabric had worn thin. That coat had traveled more miles than I realized, carried more secrets than I knew, and somehow, despite everything, it had ended right back here, exactly where I needed it to be. Sarah closed the door behind us softly. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded, then nodded again, slower, steadier. I actually am. Not healed, not safe, not finished, but okay. And that was more than I expected. We unpacked everything carefully. The notebook, the files, the key, the letter my father wrote in his slanted, desperate handwriting. We spread it all out on my kitchen table like puzzle pieces waiting to reveal something bigger. For the first time, I didn't panic looking at them. The photos didn't make my skin crawl the way they had in the motel. The files didn't feel like threats. The key didn't feel like a warning. Everything felt like information. Something I could use. Something I could understand, eventually. Something I could choose how to face. Granular pieces of truth instead of an overwhelming darkness. That shift alone was its own kind of victory. The next few hours were quiet, the comfortable kind of quiet that settles between people who have survived something together. Sarah made tea, because that's always been her instinct when life gets too sharp. I sat at the table with my hands wrapped around the cup, letting the heat soak into my palms. "What now?" she finally asked. The question used to terrify me. Now it just felt big, open, like the horizon had suddenly widened instead of closing in. "I don't know yet," I said honestly, "but I'm not afraid to find out." She smiled. "You're stronger than you think." Maybe, maybe not. But I was stronger than I had been a week ago. Stronger than the day I donated the coat. Stronger than the girl who used to believe her father's life was as simple and steady as the Sunday breakfasts he never missed. Grief had cracked something open inside me, but truth had reshaped what was left. That night, after Sarah went home to shower and sleep, I stayed awake with the notebook open in front of me. Page 17 stared back up at me. "If anything happens to me, start with the key." I touched the ink lightly. My father's last instructions. Not perfect, not complete, but full of intention. He wanted me to understand something about myself, about him, about the people who had watched us for decades. He didn't leave me answers, he left me direction. And maybe that's all he could do. A part of me still ached with the enormity of what he went through alone. Another part, a part growing larger each day, felt grateful for the chance to meet the version of him I never knew. The braver one, the complicated one, The one who fought for me with everything he had. He wasn't perfect. He wasn't simple. He wasn't the man I thought he was. But he was mine. And he loved me enough to build a wall around secrets that could have consumed both of us. Now it was my turn to carry the truth forward, not as a burden, but as a responsibility, a legacy. As dawn crept through my window the next morning, I made a quiet promise to myself. I would figure out what Wellington Research Group wanted. I would figure out why they tracked me. I would figure out why my father left the program. I would figure out who I was, the one he wrote not to trust.